Executive Director of the Bucks County Planning Commission and also the County Chief Clerk. I've worked with the Planning Commission for 16 years, but I've been a resident of Bucks County for close to 45 years, and obviously feel strongly about the county. My background, my education is in city planning, so I'm a planner by education and training and experience. In addition to heading the Planning Commission, I was part of the very first open space task force that the Bucks County Commissioners formed in the late 1990s before I worked for the county. So what I'm going to do today is talk a little bit about a brief overview of the history of Bucks County and how we became interested and concerned about preserving the character of Bucks County, preserving the land, preserving the farming community. And that's going to start roughly in the 1950s when Bucks County started to grow really rapidly, take us up to the late 1990s when we actually started our open space and farmland preservation programs, and then Rich Harvey is going to take it from there and tell you what we've done with our programs. So let's see if we can do this. So that's our history. So I'm going to start, roughly 60 years ago when 3/4 of Bucks County was in farmland. At that point we had 3,200 farms. We have roughly 700 today. And you can see what Lower Bucks looked like in 1955, and clearly it's changed. We'll see another picture of that later. So in the 1950s to 55, there was scanning all of our records, our minutes, our newspaper clippings. There was very little concern in the middle of the decade about the rapid growth in Bucks County. Falls Township, which is in Lower Bucks County, grew to, as you can see, to over 25,000 people in a very short period of time. Huge impact on local government. And one thing we're concerned about was not so much the loss of the farmland, but building a community. 25,000 new people in a community, and they were not concerned about farmland preservation as much as they were about building the community. Looking back at the newspaper records, so for those of you who are local will recognize this. Today, if we look at the newspaper, we see news about Bensalem or Warrington or Southampton or Doylestown. But in the old days, the news all came from the small villages, those sort of community centers, Blooming Glen, Forest Grove, places like that were the small village centers, the centers of a rural farming community. So that has certainly changed. So between 1955 and 1960, we had some landmark events in Bucks County. Levittown, 17,500 and some houses built in a very short period of time. The Fairless Hills development, the U.S. Steel Fairless Works, built on, as we know, some of the very best farmland of Bucks County. The last leg of the Pennsylvania Turnpike, which started in the western part of the state and moved east, was completed through Bucks County in the mid-1950s. So all these things brought changes. You can see what Levittown looks like. So as I said before, what people were concerned about was building facilities to serve this growing population. The community got together and in Levittown and created the Lower Bucks Hospital. It was a community-driven facility. They were concerned about schools, fire protection, all those things that make a solid community. At that time, there were no county parks in Bucks County. Now we have an outstanding county park system, but according to our records, Bucks County officials went over to New Jersey to figure out how they provided parks for their more densely populated communities. So how and when did Bucks County residents become concerned about this issue of losing farmland and open space and about the change in the landscape? There's a lot written about how Bucks County and its really scenic character attracted not only residents but some artists and writers and musicians who settled here because of the beautiful farmland, rolling hills, the scenic river valley. And so at what point do people get concerned about this? Well, the first evidence that we can find is 1961. And Bucks County Planning Commission was formed in 1951, really in response to all this projected new growth. 10 years later, we prepared our first county comprehensive plan, the first time anyone had looked at Bucks County as a whole to figure out what its future might be. And there's an acknowledgement in there that agriculture was disappearing, and talks about land and farms declining rapidly in the 1950s. 70,000 acres of farmland were lost. Most of that loss occurred in Lower Bucks County, where we talked about Levittown and Fairless Hills. And it interestingly notes that the farms were consolidating. The average size of the farm had increased to 69 acres during that time, up to 92 acres. So that's an interesting phenomenon that I was not aware of. So this was the first time we see in our county records an evidence that there's some acknowledgement of the loss of farmland. But it took us a whole other decade to get to the point in the 1970s where people started to really get concerned about the character of the county, the loss of farmland. So interestingly, the county commissioned the Gallup organization to do a poll of residents of Bucks County. And you can see the results there. What happened? The County Planning Commission, before this poll was taken, had done an in-depth survey of all of the natural resources, the scenic areas, the farmland, so we knew what was there. And the questions were asked about how people felt about actually preserving and protecting those areas. So you can see a very strong support, even in the mid-1970s, for saving farmland, saving scenic areas. So I would say that what happened after that was we knew there was public support for it. We knew that it was important to address the changing character of Bucks County. But there was a lot of hand-wringing for another probably 15 years before we kind of figured out what to do about it. So a lot of things were tried. Obviously, could you save farmland as part of the development process? And there's the county planning commission developed this technique called performance zoning, which for the first time suggested that when a property is being developed, let's not just develop it and grade it and put development on every inch of it, but can we identify what's critical about that parcel? Are there prime agricultural soils? Are there important woodlands? Are there wetlands? Are there steep slopes that really should be preserved? So this concept of performance zoning was developed in Bucks County, and it became actually a national standard for looking at development and zoning. There was a seminar held in the late 1970s on transfer of development rights. It's still a concept that's hard to grasp and rarely used, and that would be the idea of preserving a property and transferring the rights to develop that onto another property where development makes sense. 200 people attended that seminar, so that's sort of unprecedented for something like that in the 1970s. But the preservation of natural features became a fundamental part of our planning and development guidelines in Bucks County. There was also, well, let's see, we can use development controls. What else can we do to help preserve farmland? So the tax policy was also a consideration at the state level. And the preferential tax program, which we knew as Act 515, which has since been amended and replaced, was a proposal that was put into place, considered by Bucks County and ultimately adopted. And that program would allow taxes to be assessed not based on the potential for a farm being a housing development or for its farming value. And so that went into effect. Again, a huge turnout. 600 people over at CB East High School came out to learn about that program. And then the question came up, well, we have zoning controls, we have tax policy. Could we just buy this land? We know we have public support for buying it. How do we do that? There was an estimate made, actually, countywide on what would it cost to buy those 35,000 acres of prime farmland, and an additional acreage, the additional scenic areas. And it turned out to be about $175 million to actually buy the land outright. Now today we're all pretty familiar with the concept of easements, where we don't buy the land outright, we buy the development rights and get rid of those, and then the farm remains as a farm. So separating the dirt from the right to development is a concept that was not really well formulated in the 1970s. It took a little while, it took some legislation, it took some thought as to how that would work. So the easement idea, which today we do all the time, was not well considered or well established. So public sentiment became the basis for a new direction in Bucks County in the county's 1976 comprehensive plan. These were somewhat turbulent times actually in Bucks County, and because there was a very strong contingent of people who felt that open space was important. So the key mission, the key goal of this plan, it said that the plan declares that agriculture is a basic land use and that it shall be protected and enhanced as an important land function of Bucks County. This is pretty radical. First time Bucks County has ever come straight out and said this is really important. So this established a new direction, and we'll sort of fast forward through what happened after that. In 1986, the Bucks County appointed a 12-member farmland retention advisory committee to address the increasing economic difficulties and rapid loss of agricultural land in the county. Some of our farmers that had went on to be part of our Farmland Preservation Board were on that committee. That Agricultural Land Preservation Board was then formed in 1989. Rich Harvey will talk more about that. In 1991, we enrolled our first farm in the land preservation program. Starting again in the mid-90s, municipalities started to borrow money to preserve open space, not just farmland, but other kinds of open space. In 1995, the county commissioners appointed an open space task force, and at that time, farmland was a big part of that. And this is, I can boil down a couple of days of discussion into one sentence. The Bucks County Open Space Task Force decided that open space meant three things. It meant farmland, it meant natural areas, things that have natural value, forests, wetlands, and it meant parkland. So those three things, because there's a lot of discussion, is cemetery open space, is a golf course open space, but we kind of boiled it down to farmland, natural areas, and parkland. So the first county program was established where the county put on a referendum on the ballot and supported, the public supported to a large extent the $59 million for farms, parks, and natural areas. We then commissioned a natural areas inventory. We said we're going to spend money on natural areas. What are those natural areas? We had the University of Pennsylvania come out and tell us what are the critical natural areas from forests, limestone valleys, animal and plant habitat, etc. So that program, that $59 million, very successful. 2007, 10 years later, the commissioners decided to do it again. And the notable thing about this was in 2007, we put on the ballot the idea of spending $87 million to continue this open space program. And interestingly, the referendum won in every one of our 304 polling places except for one where there was a tie vote. So there was. I knew you'd ask that. I think it was not in Warminster. It was not in Warminster though. Well. So it was clearly continued to be very successful. So when the voters supported this $87 million, and we're still in that program. It's a 10-year program which will end in 2017. So just to close, why is Bucks County unique in its approach to open space? Number one, both the county program, and we have both the county program and many municipal programs. I mean, we were really the first to partner with municipalities in both farmland preservation and other kinds of open space preservation. Mostly our funding is from borrowing from bonds, but some municipalities have enacted in accordance with the state law a small incremental earned income tax that supports open space preservation. But we are largely funded by borrowing. Pennsylvania law actually changed because of Bucks County's partnership approach to enable a county township sharing in easement purchases. In the early days when we preserved, sometimes we would preserve something and the county would have to buy a portion and we'd have to segregate off and the township would pay for that portion, but the law was changed to allow sharing. We had the first township purchased farmland easement, the Fred Evelyn Slack farm in Buckingham. That was the first time a township did it by itself. Again, summary, strong partnerships. We've had, in addition to the change in law, we've had significant case law in Bucks County that now has become statewide because it was affirmed by the Commonwealth Court, which says that agriculture is a real land use. Agriculture is not just a farmland, it's not just a holding zone for developers to come in. It is a legitimate, important, strong land use that should be, warrants protection. And we have had creative use of all the possible tools that I've mentioned. Notably, Laura Nakefield did farmland preservation developments. We've used transfer of developments in Buckingham. Some recent innovations are to recognize the changing nature of farming, and we'll hear more about that in a minute. Certainly all the things that we'll hear a little bit about later with farm markers, CSAs. The county has initiated a new loan program which is called Taste and Tour. It's the first time we put any of our economic development loan money into the farming community, but we developed out and through consultation with various farmers, and so that has issued its first loans to a couple of facilities in Bucks County. So that's the end of my presentation. I hope it sets the stage for Rich, who's going to tell you where we've gone with our farmland preservation after we got to the point where we realized it was important. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I also want to just thank you for devoting your career to this because it is so important, and I'm so grateful for both you and the people before you and the people, just because this is so important in Bucks County, and it does maintain this, as you said, it's unique atmosphere, and we're very grateful for it. So thank you.
Thank you. It's great to have the community, such strong community support for it. Obviously, it wouldn't happen if that didn't exist. So, okay, Rich.
Okay. I work for the Bucks County Planning Commission with Lynn. She's my boss, so I have to be really good today. I've been there for quite a number of years. I'm a Penn State graduate and a Drexel graduate, and I hate to blow my own horn, but I wrote this program back in 1989. So I've been here since the very beginning on this program. So I'd like to go over the farmland preservation program here in the county and how we preserve farms, how we pick them. You probably read about it, it's in the Herald sometimes, all the papers. Some of the farms we preserved, Del Val College we preserved. And it's in the paper every once in a while, so you read about it, but maybe you want to learn about a little bit more how we go about picking these farms. So, as Lynn said, Pennsylvania started the farmland preservation program in 1987, and we were the 4th county in Pennsylvania to develop a program. So we were one of the first. Actually, we would have been the 2nd, but we had a glitch in one of our in some of the wording, so we had to put it up on the next meeting out there. So we would have been probably the 2nd after Lancaster County. So we were really pioneers in farmland preservation, and we're very proud of that. So let me just go into how it works a little bit. Our first farm was preserved in 1990. It's a Leonard Crook farm, and it's 119 acres. And our board, we have a board that I work with. They're voluntary folks from the community. We have farmers, municipal officials, and local citizens that we meet once a month to pick farms and decide which ones we're going to go after. So these are our board members here, and some of these gentlemen, we don't have any women on our board. We did at one time, but some of these gentlemen have been here since the very beginning. So Dr. Feldstein, as you all well know, is still on our board. He's 95 years old. It's amazing. And Bill Yerkes, Penrose Howell, they've been there since the very beginning, since 1989 when we started. And as Lynn pointed out, we've lost a lot of farmland, and this is just since 1960. At that time, we had about 4,000 farms in the county. At the last census, it's down to 827 and that's about 16% of the county. So the history of Bucks County has always been farming, and we've lost quite a bit in the last 50 or 60 years. So, of course, the county decided, as Lynn pointed out, that we had to do something about it, and they decided to develop this program. Some of the agricultural characteristics are, we've gone down a little bit since the 2007 ag census. We have about 827 farms left. There's about 64,000 acres in the county in farmland right now. And the agricultural economy is about $62 million. Our number one crop is greenhouse and horticultural products. We also have a lot of grain and hay for horses. So these are the characteristics that we have in our county right now. The census definition of a farm is any place that generates $1,000 or more. So that would be considered a farm. So we have about 827 farms left in the county. And we develop we get our program funding from a variety of sources. Actually, there are 4 sources right now. Mostly it comes from the state and the county. The county has, as Lynn said, we have a bond issue that we're working from 2007. It's a 10-year bond. The state also has a cigarette tax that they've had for many years. And they also have an environmental stewardship fund. And I think they're still using some growing greener funds from way back. So that generates about $30 to $40 million from the state. And they distribute that to the counties who match the funds. So we get a fair amount of money from the state, and I'll go into that a little bit later. The other funding source that we have are municipalities, which I'll talk about in a minute, and also federal government reimbursements, FRPP. They'll reimburse us for the cost of purchasing easements on some farms. So we have 4 sources of funds right now for the county. And this table just shows the funding since the very beginning. As you can see, the first year was $400,000 from the county, and then it went down to $150,000 for a couple of years. And then back in the mid-2000s, with the new administration that came in, they really wanted to dedicate their administration toward farmland preservation, and I think that carries on to this day. So our funding has been really very good from the county commissioners. As a matter of fact, we're the second highest amount of funding that we receive from the state, in the state, this county right here, because of our funding from the commissioners. So last year, the county appropriated $2.6 million, and we got back $2.8 million, and we also have municipal involvement too as well. So we had about $5.6 million to work with for this year. And since the very beginning, if you add all that up, we've spent about $144 million preserving the land in Bucks County. It's very expensive. It's actually the most expensive in the state. But we've been very successful, and the reason why is because we have municipal involvement. When we first started the program, we developed a map that you can see here based on soils, and the best soils in the county are shown in the dark green areas. And we also we tried to identify the areas of the county where we would like to preserve farms. And that's what this map showed. And this map was actually developed back in 1986. So the green areas of the county are the best soils were carbonate geology. And they were also based on large farm holdings and where the existing farms were. So we were trying to target areas where they had the best soils and where the farms were located. And that's what this map shows. And that, like I said, this map is pretty old, but it's still very relevant. So our program or minimum requirements are usually we look at a farm that has to be 50 acres, unless it's next to another preserved property. And we're looking at soils. So soil quality is the most important thing we're looking at in our farms. It has to have half at least in class 1 through 4, and it has to be at least half in ag production. So our farms have to all be in production. The more production, they're in, the more points they get when we evaluate them. And they also have to be in a designated agricultural security area, which is basically a protection zone for farmers. And as Lynn mentioned, we are purchasing easements on the farms. We're not purchasing them outright. And there's 5 different types of easements that we have. We could have a county-only easement. We can have a county and a state easement. We can have a county, a state, and a township easement. We can have a county, a state, and municipal, and the federal government on it. Or we can have the county and a nonprofit, such as Heritage Conservancy. So these are all the types of easements that we have on our farms right now. And they can all partner with us to purchase our easements. So, and as Lynn mentioned, we were the first ones in the state to partner with municipalities. They actually changed the law to accommodate that for us. So we were very, very pleased about that, because we were working with municipalities and we thought it would be a good idea for them to do that. And our most important factor that we look at is soil quality. So the better soils on the farms, the more points they're going to get. So we have an evaluation system that we use. It's a weighted system. 40% is in the soil. We look at where the farm's located in relation to other farms that have been preserved. We look at the farm viability. If they're an owner-operator, we give them more points. And we also have to look at development potential. So we look at road frontage and the zoning and things like that. So all these factors, there's about 20 different factors that we look at. We assign points to that farm, and then we develop our list that we work off every year. And the applications, it's a totally voluntary program, so the farmers come to us. And normally we have about 40 to 50 applications every year. And it hasn't ever really gone below that. So it's a very popular program, and it always has been. And our easement values, they range, depending on where you are in the county, from $6,500 to over $20,000 per acre. We have a $10,000 per acre cap right now, and if it's over that, then here's where the municipalities come in. And if they're interested, they can help us out purchasing that easement. And then our average price per acre is $9,100. And like I said, that's about the most expensive in the state of Pennsylvania. And even despite that, we're still one of the leaders in Pennsylvania in preserving land, because we have those municipalities able to help us. And again, that varies depending on location in the county. The southern part of the county are a lot more expensive, the easement values. And then as you go up north, it's not quite as expensive. But it's still expensive overall compared to other counties in the state. And then we take applications once a year in December, although I'd like to have that changed to June, because it gets too cold to go out there and try to see farms when there's 2 feet of snow out there. So that would be good if we could move that up to June anyway. And then all the farms that meet our minimum requirements are ranked, and we have a current application list of 42 farms. Our main goal is to preserve 17,000 acres by the year 2017. We just reached the milestone this year at the Grange Fair, 15,000 acres. So I think we'll be able to make that if things keep going the way they are. And then, like I said, what really started to push us, set us apart from other counties is our working with municipalities in purchasing easements. And that all started back in 1994 with Buckingham Township. And we decided that we were preserving so many farms in Buckingham, and they were so expensive, why don't we go to the township and ask them if they're be interested in helping out. And initially they were a little bit hesitant, but then they realized that it was a good deal for everybody. And so the first easement purchase was with Buckingham in 1995, and then it had a snowball effect. A lot of other townships got in on it. And since that date, we've preserved about 5,500 acres with municipal funds. And they spent $32 million to help us out doing that. So they've been great, great help. And these are all the municipalities in the county that have bond issues. As Lynn said, there are some that have earned income tax issues in effect, but these are just the bonds. And some of these townships have floated bonds 2 and 3 times. Here's one that floated it 4 times in Salisbury Township. They put in $44 million of their own money to preserve farmland and open space. So it's really phenomenal what our townships have done in the county. It's the leader in Pennsylvania. Nobody else in Pennsylvania even comes close. And then this is just a map showing townships that have bond issues and earned income tax, a combination of both. So it's a fair amount in the whole county. Last year we had a very good year of preserving farms. We preserved almost 800 acres on 14 farms. And this map shows the location of our the current preserved farms and then the new farms. So you can see that we've been successful in preserving large blocks of farmland in Springfield Township, Bedminster Township, Durham Township, Plumstead Township, and Buckingham Township. So large blocks of farms. It's easier for the farmers to get around, and been very successful in those townships. So we're currently at 15,060 acres on 182 farms preserved to date. And then this map just shows the overall total amount of protected land through other programs in the county, the open space program, the parkland program, the natural areas program, and also other agencies. I'm not really sure the total amount, but it's probably about 50 or 60,000 acres totally with all these programs. It's a large amount of land that's been preserved in the county. The county's done a very good job of preserving its land. And then I wanted to show you on this map, now it's a little bit out of date, there are 10 states in the process of updating it, but as you can see, I don't know if you can, most of the farms that have been preserved have been in the southeastern portion of the state. And $1.3 billion has been spent in Pennsylvania since it started in 1989. 4,860 farms in Pennsylvania. That's #1 in the United States. And then challenges and opportunities, and I think you'll hear more about that from our next speakers. The age of the farmers, cost of the land, fragmentation of lands and services, taxes, municipal restrictions. You might hear a little bit more about that. But then there are opportunities, diversification of crops, farm markets, CSAs, and agritourism is a really big thing right now. So that's it. In a nutshell, how the program works. Thank you.
I'm excited to be here. I'm really excited to be a part of the Precarious Alliance. It's an opportunity to talk about all these things and sometimes takes a look at the challenges and the goods and everything that is here. So I'd really like to thank you for making me a part of this. I'd also really like to thank my grandparents who are no longer alive, my dad, who is a graduate of Del Valle University, and my uncle, because they put our farm in a position to be really, really successful in a really unique area, and the decisions that they made on their farm is really what has made us successful and really made things, I'm not going to say easy for us, but has really put us in a decision. So my brother, sister, and I, who are currently the owners of Shady Brook Farm, talk all the time about the decisions that we're making today and whether they will affect our kids, our grandkids, and how they're going to do. So this issue, being very important to us, offers some unique perspectives. So Shady Brook Farm is down in Lower Makefield Township. We actually, looking at those maps, we have 47 acres in Middletown Township, 31 acres in Newtown Township, and 51 acres in Lower Makefield. So we go right across that little divide where we pay taxes to all three and have 3 different municipalities to work with and deal with. And quite honestly, that's been a very good experience. This is the 4th property that Shady Brook Farm has owned. We were in Center City, Philadelphia. We went way back when, we're 103 years old. Then we were in Bustleton Avenue. Then we were on Woodhaven Road, and we came to this current farm in 1970. So we've moved our property over times, and it's been really important to us. And the focus of our business has been really interesting. Way back when, with my grandfather, we grew pansies, we grew celery, we grew truck crops that went into Center City, Philadelphia. With my dad and uncle, we grew spinach, we grew turnips, and we grew crops that went down into Landover, Maryland, into Washington. It had a really unique niche in the farming industry. I graduated from the University of Delaware in 1990, and I had the great job of being able to grow a retail business for us. And it was a gentleman named on the paper up here, Mr. Bill Yerkes, who came down to my parents and my uncle and said, if you don't put a farm market on your property, I'm coming down to put one on your property because it's the best location for a farm market around. And I just thought that was really interesting. So I got the great job of being able to grow retail for our business. We had no retail at that time. We were 100% wholesale. And it was really, really a unique opportunity for us to be able to do that. So I think that's really put us into some unique situations that we kind of have been cutting edge. We have been a little bit different. My dad's philosophy was adapt or die. And you need to change with the times. And we really have enhanced that, but we really feel that we cut to what people want. They want to come to a farm, they want to be a part of it. And we're kind of unique in that way. So farmland preservation is unique to us. One of the great dilemmas we have is that the value of our land is very, very high. And when you have a limitation on per price acreage, it doesn't necessarily make sense for us to identify and look at that as an opportunity for us to be able to preserve it. Some of the other concerns that come along with farmland preservation, there are restrictions on what you can do from a retail standpoint and what you can't do. And we do know that the townships will work and really try to help those farms out. So I don't think that's really as serious an issue as it comes down to. So really what some of the discussions that we had were, what if we're teaching, I have 4 kids, my brother has 4 kids, and my sister has 2 kids. Our goal is to make them upstanding citizens who develop choices and go out there and make good decisions for themselves. I hope that that decision is that they're going to be a part of our family business. But I don't know for sure that that's really what they're going to want to do. And I don't necessarily want to tie their hands. Maybe they're going to be the best doctor in the world, they're going to be the best this, and maybe this isn't the avenue for them. And selling those preservation rights to that, what will that do to them? Because they still have to maintain that property. So the preservation model that we've kind of taken is if people want us to be there, they're going to come out and shop, they're going to come out and support us, and they're going to come into our store, and we will be there for a long time. So as great as preservation is, and as much as we want to do that, from a personal standpoint, the preservation that we're going to have is hopefully through a business model that makes a successful business, that people can vote for us every day by shopping at our place with their dollars. So that's been a very important part for us. A secondary concern in selling development rights would be the potential borrowing power to build a store or to use your farm as collateral, and diminishing the value of that piece of ground to be able to use for future expansion into businesses. And I think we're seeing, at least I feel we're seeing some of that with some of the farms that have gone through preservation that are in bankruptcy and that have started to go to sale. And there are farmers who have sold their development rights and the next generation are trying to make a go of it, or they've sold their farm to a relative who's trying to make a go of it and has some difficulty making a go. Part of it is bad business practices, but part of it, I think, is the dollars are being used towards that type of area. Farmland for so long to farmers has been their 401k plan. This is the way that they retired. They would either sell some of their land and be able to retire. And in our farm, that's what has happened. My uncle has retired out of our business, and we have sold off some ground to be able to have him retire. And when you take that money for that generation, the next generations and how they can grow the business and how they can work is really something that concerns us. I have just 2 other things that I think are really interesting, and I thought of this the last couple days, and I'd really be interested on this conversation in the future to hear from somebody here at the university on, as they are getting phone calls from people who are interested in having their farm donated to the college, what some of the problems that they are running into as far as maintaining those properties and what happens with maintenance afterwards. And specifically thinking of down in Lower Makefield with the Patterson property, which is a really unique, and Lynn, you can probably speak better about this, but the township actually took ownership of that property using preservation dollars. And they're having really a lot of conversation and problems around the maintenance of the barns. And wondering in the future if maintenance of these properties could go into open space funds, because it's becoming a real eyesore on certain farms, and it's becoming something they don't take advantage of. And one of the thoughts that somebody had said to me in the last 2 days was maybe taking a percentage of those open space funds to be put back into the preservation of some of these great barns that sometimes then don't have the ability to be preserved. So that's really my quick thoughts.
All right, Dave, thank you very much.
So I lease land on a farm in Silveray Township. I lease about 13 acres from two friends of mine who own the property. They bought it about 3 years ago. It was preserved when they bought it. And I lease land to grow organic vegetables. I have a CSA, I sell at farmers markets. I also sell to restaurants in the area and do a little bit of wholesale. It's quite small. I have 4 employees. We do 8 acres of vegetables production. The rest we rotate in cover crops and are doing our best to maintain good soil and land use practices. So I grew up in Bucks County. As we have all noticed, there are developments popping up everywhere, and I grew up watching that happen. So I'm a huge supporter of land preservation in this area. I also became a farmer. I started farming in high school. I studied in college. It's the only thing I've ever done, but I'm also not from a farming family. I'm a first generation farmer, and this is my own business. So I've come at it as someone who is very enthusiastic about land preservation, about soil conservation, about organic practices, and about direct marketing to consumers, getting healthy food from the land that they live around directly to them. So farming on a piece of preserved property and it has ended up being a little bit more challenging than I thought. I came at it, well, there's 2 things. I was really excited to be a steward of a piece of land that was preserved. This is a piece of property that's going to be open for whoever knows, the end of time. And so this is my opportunity to take care of it and to make sure that there's no erosion, that the ecosystems there are healthy, that the water systems are working. It's also the only way that anyone could afford land in Silveray Township to farm it. So it's a very important part of this piece is that the people who own the property that I lease bought this property because they could get it and because they wanted it to be farmed and they wanted it to be an organic production. So the thing that we learned is that our piece of property is not agriculturally preserved, it's open space preserved. I'm not sure if the specifics of that were talked about very much in the last presentations, but turns out that's a pretty big difference. My story is that we ended up putting up a high tunnel. I don't know if any of you know what that is. It's a greenhouse plastic structure. It's sort of a metal framed hoop house, and we were using it to grow vegetables and flowers. It has no foundation. We were growing in soil. It was basically a protectant for the crops from weather and disease. We put up this high tunnel outside of our building envelope. So that's another sort of specific thing about easements on farms is that if there will generally be a place where you can put up structures and buildings that are not, that won't be regulated in terms of easement space, in terms of the open space. We put it outside the building envelope because we put it in a space that was better for growing. This is an impermanent structure used to protect crops. That's sort of how it's defined by the state and by the USDA. So we were excited to work with our conservation. Our easement is owned by a nonprofit, it's owned by the township, and it's also owned by the county. So we didn't really think it was going to be a big deal. It's about 30 feet wide and 70 feet long. It's not very big. And we were excited to have conversations about what we were doing with it and how it was being integrated into our organic crop systems. Unfortunately, we ended up having to have a bigger conversation than we had anticipated. The language in our easement was not flexible to have this structure